Greetings and welcome to today's edition of Paint Here Now. I'm Will Parody, and we're going to continue painting. Well, imagine that. We started on Monday this piece, this abstract painting. We started off with making circles, derpy, and kind of going on based on sort of color and a nice rhythmic feel. And I don't know, it was candy-like almost, I thought. Or there's something that was nice about it, like a sort of a confetti feeling. But there was all these circles, and part of why we make these circles is because circles are great round objects that connect very well to other objects when you're looking at larger forms. For example, this here, right, or this dot is a circle, or this is a circle, but this is also a circle, and this is a circle, because these circles connect together to make a larger circle. Like atoms connect to make molecules, and molecules connect to make everything. No, not everything in the universe, but a good deal of stuff in the universe. I believe that there are existences in our universe that are not made of atoms, molecules, or anything physical, but that's another story. Or is it? Because, I guess, since this is the direction we're going down, if you look at art, a lot of art, and this is a big motivation for the art that I make, when you have these forms, these lines, these circles, these dots, these things that come together to make a larger piece, if you look in it, you see faces, you see creatures, you see things. I'm trying to make things that are smiley and this and that sometimes, but it's not intentional, but things happen that way because of our association with these forms and these things, because in here, in this living universe, out comes these entities, if you will. And the fact that they are more than just paint, the fact that we can view things that we see, any kind of art is, oh, that's a person, but especially the stuff that's made up of just like the stuff of life in a way, because it start a piece like this, it's the stuff of life. It's just form and light, dots, color, until it creates something. And so when you look at a piece that invites the imagination to see different forms and shapes and faces, it really implies that those forms, shapes, and faces can exist in the things that you see in life, and that they actually do exist. Otherwise, why would we have an association with them in the first place? So we had a little bit. I think we're gonna keep this. This is gonna be the intro. We got a little philosophical here, but that's what art is all about. Really, let your imagination not just be about, oh, I need to make something look like this. Let art take your imagination into questions, into new universes, into new ways of doing things that are fun, that are inviting, that are really artful. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the palette that we're going to be using. So, here we have basically a continuation of last week. I added a little bit of pink, a slightly different pink. It's not the opera rose. It's that I love to use so much. It's a fluorescent pink. It's also good. A lot more of it. But I basically kept the palette that we started last time. I had it covered up with a tray of paints. You can use a piece of aluminum foil or whatnot, something that you can recycle and reuse. In fact, if you have a piece of foil that you use for something, clean it off, or get a burrito or something, if it's not that real cheap chintzy foil that's like paper, then clean it off some, and you can reuse it for one, to cover something like this, if you will. I happen to just have something I lay flat on top of it. And it can help to keep the paints and save them so you can use them for another day. So we're using a brush like this. It's kind of a flat-edged brush, fairly small. We also use a jar like this with some water. This is acrylic paint. It can dry quick, but it's also water soluble. So we use some water, and sometimes we clean our brushes. And so I started to talk about this piece and how we used circles and these patterns to find forms and to create a rhythm in the painting that keeps an interest and keeps the eye moving and has some neat stuff going on. There's contrast, but there's a harmony in contrast. And even without it being of anything in particular, there's sort of an inviting rhythm about this piece. And that's one of the things about abstraction. And the more you learn how to paint abstraction, for those of you who are just beginning or just starting to paint with us or starting a paint period, and are really interested in abstraction and what makes it work, what makes it actual art and stuff, it's because it is the stuff of art. You have all the details and color mixing and all of this stuff, most of the stuff that you would need in, really all that you would need in painting some kind of an imagery, because really all art is abstraction, and it can very, very much become a reality. All art is, you know. And so when we paint abstract, you know, sometimes it can be difficult to know how to start and what makes it good and this and that, if it can be kind of anything. But yes, you still incorporate color knowledge, skill of stroke and mark, you know, if you're painting small like this, like if you're, and that's one of the things I advocate about maximalist painting, as I like to call it, with a lot of marks and small dots and marks, is because it does hone your skills. You're blending, you're mixing, you're making marks, you know, and you might not have to go in this exact spot to make this exact eye look in this exact spot like a photorealist type of piece, but not, art does not have to be that way. In fact, it can't always be that way. It has to be this way sometimes. I really believe that. And so when you do these little dots and little lines, even if you're not painting anything that other people are going to recognize or just be like, wow, oh man, that looks so like much like that, it doesn't matter. You are still honing your skills. You're still developing a relationship with painting. So it's a really, another really important facet of this kind of artwork. So in a minute, we're going to get a bit close up and we're going to work on this piece in earnest. And what we'll start with is basically a continuation of some of these shapes and forms and where some other ones might come up. Like there's another circular sort of form in here I think I want to try to find. It's already bringing itself out. And in here, and then we'll see what it does. Are we going to have layers of these circles? Are some going to have more of a sense of depth than others, depending on the colors we use? So we'll see what happens. But there's all kinds of fun things and choices that we can make as a painter to go into this kind of painting. And if you're painting along with us, I know that your piece looks very different than this, and I hope it does. In fact, if you are going to paint with us, if I have any rules, one rule or one thing that I would just, I ask that you don't do is I just ask that you don't copy or mimic this work. I want you to make your own work. I think one of the most important parts about art is taking some, maybe I'm here to inspire. Maybe this helps you get some ideas or whatnot. And I hope that this sharing does that. But it's about getting your own imagination flowing to take some of these concepts that I'm showing in my own work and find your own voice and your own self in it. So please remember that, you know, whatever it is you're painting, even if it's a realistic something or other, always make it something it's your own. I can't emphasize that enough. So with that note, that one little thing out of the disclaimer, whatever you want to call it, out of the way, let's get to some good close-up painting here. All right. Well, let's see here. First, take our brush, grab some paint. I'm grabbing some blue because it's a nice, this blue's not super dark, but it's dark enough. It's also kind of nice and bold. It's also not the boldest of blues. It's, compared to our palette though, it's got a good medium boldness, I would say. And it's a nice way to start finding things. And again, I'm not copying any strokes, or I'm not connecting dots per se. But we are looking at previous strokes and marks that we've made and following some of their patterns, especially the circular ones. Like I said before, I really want to emphasize circles making circles, and using some of these small lines like I am now, these marks, these Van Goghian or Seurat-like strokes, these impressionistic strokes, you could say. It was one of the things that it wasn't like the first time ever, but it was very, very innovative, the way people really started to break paintings into strokes. It was back in the mid to late 1800s, let's put it that way. And into the turn of the century, of course, when abstraction became a fluid fluid and moving entity in the world and the art world. Um, but to be able to make a painting with all these just dots like this and strokes like that, and then back up and it's this beautiful image. It's and there's a reason that impressionist work, people like Monet, Van Gogh, and so on and so forth, Georges Seurat and Cezanne, for example. There's others, Renoir, but people who are that genre, but especially like Van Gogh, for example, who use those strokes like this, and it did so much passion and emotion with his work. I mean, there's a reason that that work is still resonates with us today, and it didn't resonate with everybody in its time, although it did catch on in its own time. But nowadays, it's such a big part of people's regular view, opinion of, or exposure to art. It's that kind of work, and or work that's of more of that nature, you know. If not way kinds of brushstrokes all over, it's still more of an emphasis on that. So even though it's a bit, you know, you don't think about it as powerful, I mean, or as breakthrough necessarily now, but it really is or was a way that to really change the eye's relationship to the picture plane. And so to carry that into abstraction, I think, is a way in which we can really cover a lot of ground into how we can relate to paintings, what our minds, eyes, and therefore minds and hearts and all that do when we experience a piece that's a whole bunch of sort of directional, you know, these lines and these little microcosms and these little relationships all brought into these larger pictures that don't necessarily mean or don't necessarily emulate images or things that we are going to see in our everyday life. You know, if I painted a tree, if I went outside and painted a tree or something in flowers, and even if I got them, wow, those look really like those flowers, but it's still a painting, that's so cool, you know, and that kind of thing. Ultimately, the emphasis is again on the flowers. If I'm painting it, I could paint in a way that's subliminally and compositionally very active, very much like this. I could start with abstraction and pull out the flowers, and then get a piece that's recognizable and gets kind of the mind and the soul and the subconscious going on these other kind of deeper levels. But in the meantime, it's still a service to the rose out there. If I go and just paint it to emulate it or whatnot, there's still that. I don't know exactly how to say it. It's sort of there's still a sort of reliance on the subject matter as soon as the subject matter is presented. The viewer, like, yes, the more you look into a piece, you can see the subject matter doesn't really matter per se. You can strip away any meaning and you still have beautiful subliminal compositional intent and all this kinds of stuff. But when it is of something, there is an immediate service to that something, and we're immediately connected to that something in our lives and how it relates to us in our lives. When you're painting an abstraction, this is not in anybody's life, like, per se. I mean, yeah, someone can close their eyes or dream or whatever, have experiences in which you might see something not unlike this, but this image, this painting exists because of the relationship of the artist. That's me in this case. Could be you if you're painting along with us, because the relationship the artist has with color finding its place and form on this surface. I mean, it's really a simple thing, like, and that's one of the reasons that it can be very difficult and hard to really achieve. Abstraction it's a beautiful, almost fundamentally important connection to the larger energy of art. I cannot emphasize the importance of abstraction enough. Abstraction has the traction to make great action. to our subconscious satisfaction. So, what in the holly who blazes am I doing with this paint, anyways? As I'm talking about stuff. I'm talking about stuff. I am adding, so you can see I've added more yellow. I'm just getting off of some fluorescent yellow because it definitely, with these smaller dots, brings a bright out. So I'm going to step back for a second, actually. We're going to take a look at this piece. And now I'm seeing that there is a bit of a division of a darker, these kind of larger circles and whatnot. It's a little bit bluer, cooler, darker. Not completely, but definitely bluer, cooler, darker than these areas up here. Yellower, greener, and in some cases warmer. Less of these kinds of circles up in here. A lot less of this green and yellow. A lot more solid blue. So I think I'm going to go with this. Oh gosh. It's getting dangerously close to being a landscapey type of a piece again, where there's a distinct foreground, background, and this can be water, and this can be a hill, and all this stuff. So that's, if we are keeping it, and that's one of the beauties and perils of, should say, of abstraction is when you get to this level of really trying to create a plane in which all kinds of different things that could pop out, even though you still want to focus on it as an abstraction that isn't about anything in particular. Well, there's a mouthful. If you really, start to look at some of these elements in relation to what it might mean in our life, and sometimes it can be hard not to, really hard not to, then yes, a lot of these elements come out and they become more clear. It could be a nice piece. So I'm just going to, I don't know, keep painting a little bit since I have blue on the brush, but I'm looking at that now. Do I want to follow that? Do I want to make this a little bit more evocative of a landscape? Or do I want to keep it to a realm of abstraction? I mean, last time I was looking at it, I was almost seeing jellyfish. And I like that, honestly. And if you think about this, so look at this piece if you can, and I hope that you can see this. It's it's part of the magic of art, and it's part of the thing that really, oh man, just connect us to just this wonderful aspect of consciousness, if not consciousness itself. It's just an amazing thing. So please, I hope you can see what I'm trying to show you here. One of the beauties of this, and again, starting with an abstract piece, and if you want to move to a piece that's kind of got more imagery or realism, it's a great way to look at what we can do. So I'm going to start with the first thing I brought up, the landscapey kind of a piece. So granted, the sky would be maybe a little green, maybe there's some trees, but there's something there, evocative of this is almost separate from this. And I'm naturally seeing this could be hill or type of thing. This to me looks very watery, like, this could be a number of kind of different things. It could be flowers coming up on a hill, but this becomes more watery, okay, in a sense. And again, there seems to be a little separation. Nothing's really defined. It's all still very surreal and abstract. This could almost be watery, or it could be field-like. Again, more something rolling here. This could be a background rolling or into the sky or its own form. So there's a number of these things that the imagination might see. And then elements of clouds, just elements of a surreal background in an abstract kind of a piece. You can bring out those elements more and more, okay? So there's that way of looking at it. Now, close your eyes for a second, or turn around, or shake your head around, and then relax, and then look at the piece again, okay? I'll count to 3 silently. All right, let's look at the piece again. Now, it's not what it just was. Now look at this. Here's this jellyfish floating in this kind of cool, warm green sea, but it's bluer down here, so this is obviously lighter, closer to the surface maybe, and this is getting deeper. Look at this. It's like a jellyfish with a swiveling forms, and there's another one up in here. Oh, God, maybe there's one of the interesting sort of a jellyfish. It's got this other center. It's alien-like. Is it an eye? But there's this, again, jellyfish type form. There's one over here, even one starting here. Again, there's one kind of starting here, definitely one up in here. So you're seeing, now you've got all these little jellyfish things, or these squiggly kind of forms coming. So you can take both of those ideas, the one of the landscape and the one of the jellyfish, from this abstract piece that's not supposed to be any of those things, and you can roll with either of them. You can say, yeah, you know, that really does look like a landscape, and then start pulling out your own thing and coming, you know, and you know, do this with your work. Or you can look at the other thing that you might see and like, oh, well, maybe I'm going to bring these out more. Maybe they're not exactly jellyfish, maybe they are, but I'm going to bring these out more from this background so they're more distinct. And you can do that. And we might end up doing that. I am not sure. But it's great to be able to see this and look at this. And it's a different way of looking at art rather than, oh, what do I have to do next in order to make this? No. What is this showing you in order for you to find the next thing for you to do in this universe that you can swim around in forever? So it's beautiful stuff. But what we're going to do now is I'm just going to continue. I'm not making any decision on that. I'm not following on it being a landscape or jellyfish. I'm keeping this abstract for right now. But I did want to show how you can bring that out. You know, you can even do this kind of thing and really bring it out. I want to continue to find forms, I guess, shapes, roundness. So I'm going to change it up a little bit. So every once in a while I might be painting and things are going nice. Then I'll make a mark or a couple marks out of, oh, well, that looks a little awkward. And that's a good thing, actually, because that means that there's a moment where you can see, now what? I'm not just blindly walking down a road. I have to choose here because something happened and now I'm going to make a decision in order to make the most of my journey. What is that going to be? And so, and again, with a painting, it's not like there's just two paths. Like, oh, I have to go this way or that way. This one has the goblins and this one has the leprechauns. It's, you know, they all have goblins and leprechauns. And there's any number of roads you can take in a circle, right? Because there's infinite amount of sphere. And that's kind of how I look at art. But it's the choice that's right for that circle, that sphere that you're in, you know, for the journey you're on and what's going to be the most of it. And it's part of the way to know is to do it. The discovery of what the journey means is through the journey itself. So that is art. That is art. That is painting. That is a way to connect with abstraction and to connect with what color can do, what the universe is, and all of the stuff of art. How we are, how we relate, how we interact, harmony of unlike entities that are also very much alike, and so on and so forth. So I'm continuing, I'm adding some light and white colors in here. So I'm going to do some of this pink. You see, it's definitely a different, slightly different, not in the slightest bit unworthy color, but a little bit different than our opera rose, which is an individual color that I have found no equal to. I absolutely love opera rose. Anyways, one of the great things I like about opera rose and with fluorescent pinks in general is that if you add some yellows to it, in this case I'm adding a little bit of fluorescent yellow, you get some really cool oranges. There's a lot of yellow. But see, there we go. See, look at that. And then we add some in there. We can see the contrast and the difference. And now we're also making a little bit more of a, whoa, kind of an impact on this piece. It was a bit drastic, and I like that. Sometimes you really do have to do some drastic stuff on a painting in order to bring a new life out in it, or to discover it more, discover more about what your relationship with the painting really is. A little bit more of this yellow, because I really do like the way it mixes with not only the red, of course, now we've moved to blue, but again, you make this really nice green. Oh, yeah, that's really nice. Soothing. In fact, I'm going to add some white to this, because I think that's going to look pretty cool. Well, yeah, it looks pretty cool. There with the yellow, it's a little better. But it's actually kind of like it more in its raw form. So one of the things that I'm looking at, okay, if you're trying to figure out how to paint and what I'm doing and like, what is all this? So there is some method to the madness. Of course, I've talked about the circles and the founding the forms, okay, but then I went into these shapes, okay, with this yellow and this pink, after finding these things with this pink and then deciding to add the yellow to make the orange. It kind of hooked up with this thing which was already there, and this was already there, and I've got these new yellows, and it made this mark which kind of cuts through the piece and but adds another element to it. It's nice, actually. It's kind of cool. It connects up in here somehow, but it's also really marked. So one of the things I'm trying to do is with it's, rather than using the same yellow and red or pink, I'm using some of the green and the yellow in here, but to try to just bring the eye back to this other sort of form coming up in this area that I don't want to say balances with this or counteracts, as it's not. It's about working together, but brings the eye kind of back over here again and makes this slightly less of a contrast, but more interacting with something else that's a little more like it. Hope that came out. So I did something like this, with these blotchier shapes, and I'm doing something else here with these blotchier shapes kind of to connect with it. There, that was a simpler way of putting it. And then something like this I'll do because I felt like there's this connect, but then there's this point in the center, and sometimes I'll just do something that's almost independent, but is still right there. And now, look, we got brought up more to here. So now our view's changing a little bit by acting on these impulses and following this new path. Yes, you can still pull out the things we've talked about, the jellyfish, the life forms, the landscapes, but now we're seeing more options. Now there's other things. These could almost be their own living things, or fish or jellyfish. Again, we're keeping it abstract, but just to keep the mind flowing. But again, it's about the composition of things. So now we have this shape that kind of came in here, and this one in here, and now we have this coming straight, but not exactly. There's the curves. There's a curve the eye follows here. There's a slighter curve the eye follows here. And they're comes up kind of to here, but it also brings up a little bit more in here. So there's this continued connection. Add a little bit more just to bring that out subtly. So do you see what I mean? Like what just color can do, and when you add these different things and listen to the piece and follow kind of your eye, add these contrasts here and there, take little chances, but also follow forms, it's just amazing where things can lead you. So now I want to add some of this purple. We're going to make things a little bit bolder here in some areas. It brings out, it's going to dry darker. You can already see it's dark compared to a lot of our colors. I'm going to some areas where it already exists, or where there's some little bit of dark, and it looks like if we brought out a little bit more, it might be bold. So I've got a dangler. Can you see this? I've got this little piece, little hanger. It's not in any real threat of falling anytime soon. And sometimes when I have something like that, I want to find an area that feels really appropriate of it, that's kind of special, or where it's going to have a good impact. Well, this one just called me right here. This curve right under here, this blue with this green, and curve it in a little bit, see how it drops. Not disappointed. That works. It brings this over in here more. It kind of connects this to this, brings this down, connects this in. So see, this was a nice junction mark. It really brought a lot of pieces together, and these elements of the piece together. You'll find that more as you paint. Your eye's going to be drawn to those moments. Sometimes the one way to tell if you're seeing one or not is how much it bounces with, you can put your brush up to it and then take a look. But in this area, there wasn't a lot of these purples but there was stuff going on that connected up here. So you might look and see that. Well, what can I do to make this feel like it's more connected to these other purples? And this one really, because of its direction, its thickness, and, its slight curve, it's coming, it's bold. It's coming really to bring out a lot more of these other purples. So that's just something that you can continue to find in your own work, these elements that make painting so interesting. So that's pretty cool with that purple and these other elements. I was not sure if this piece was going to be finished today, if we were going to do, you know, the three episode and finish a piece thing like we attempted last time. We're not going to do that. This is a really nice painting, and there's still a lot more that we can do to this piece. So we're going to paint it some more. We might even go, we're going to shoot to have it done by next week. So next week's group of lessons, 3 lessons, approximately half-hour apiece, give or take. And then we'll see if we can have a nice finished piece. We have a nice new sets of directions going on. We've brought out some really much stronger elements of the piece. Bring out a few more of these smaller elements. A little bit more purple. Right now I'm adding just a little bit more, kind of just where there's some white, and I don't want to just fill in whites, but I'm adding a little just fainted paint, okay? Just what's on the, whoops. See, what's on the brush. On that side of the brush I had more than I thought, but that's all right. And again, we're not just willy-nilly putting it places. If we follow, if we're, you know, it's very easy at this point because we've made a lot of marks leading us in these kind of forms and circular directions that we can almost automatically just, I don't want to say fill in the blanks. It's so not what it's doing, but the eye can find the places to put the next marks with a greater, you know, sense of autonomy because of the groundwork we've laid for it. Yeah. So, just a little bit more pink in here because just curious. See what's going to happen with some of these smaller marks. You know what? I'm not just going to add some straight yellow, but I'm going to add a little bit of more orange. And it's going to be almost a brown orange. And I'm just going to do that in here a little bit where there's some orange and some brown already. Just a few marks, because sometimes we can paint with these smaller strokes in between some of these others, and it just gives not only a little bit of contrast, often subtle contrast, but again, sense of direction and also sense of variable. More elements with which for the color to interact. We're going to do a little bit more over here too. With this a little bit more subdued orangey brown color. Might have to switch sides next week a little bit. Yeah, all right. So that was a little bit bolder than I thought it was going to be. I was just adding this in, and I like that because it brings a little bit more to this blue, and it's an orangey green, which is good because that's a good complementary contrast to the blue, especially with the orange. Kind of takes care of some of the stuff going on in here. I hope you can see this, just in case. In here, okay. And it also gives a little bit more element of interest in here. Not feeling even as watery. Now we've moved away and we've kept it a little bit more abstract. We're going to have fun continuing to paint this piece, folks. So, all right. I think that's where we're going to call it for right now. All right, well, here we go. Any last minute thoughts? I'm asking my brush to the canvas. We started with this blue. We're going to end with this blue right in here because this just, to me, as I'm looking a little bit closer, I don't know. I didn't want to end on that note with this in there. A little bit of extra, so something that gives us a little bit of something else to look at and do. We're not trying to finish it right now. Just any little unanswered questions for the day. That's good enough. So we had a lot of fun painting this. I know I sure did. I hope you are having fun making your own very different abstraction at home, but having a lot of fun finding the circles and forms and doing what you want with them. and using these different color contrasts. We're going to continue on next week when we come back on this painting and talk more about what art might mean and what these colors can do and various things, shapes and whatnot. And perhaps we'll sing a song or two. I don't know. We will see what comes true. Anyways, have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you so much for your ear and your time. Keep making art.